What is really, really exciting, you're seeing information here which you wouldn't normally be seeing. For me, it was the scoop of the decade.
I'm Christopher Hope, the Telegraph's Associate Editor, and I was there when the Telegraph broke the 2009 MP's expenses scandal.
What a time. MPs were always underpaid going back into the 1980s and 90s because they were reluctant to take pay rises because that might give them bad headlines. So what had happened was the whips had quietly said to MPs, look, just push through some expenses claims of this and that. We can pay those so we can top up your pay. When the Freedom of Information Act came in, when Tony Blair passed it, that offered a chance for the lid to be lifted on how MPs were really being paid. Submissions were put in by journalists for the Telegraph and the Sunday Times, and eventually it came to the point where Parliament was told to release these expenses claims going back 4 years at the time. There was a big issue about what you release, and there's a view that they should cross out personal details of MPs, and that was taking place in the early part of 2009 in a room in Parliament. I remember being phoned up by Chris Evans, who's now our editor, at the time was the head of news, and he said, can you come in for some special training? At the time the Telegraph was going through a lot of changes. We were moving from being a newspaper into a multimedia publisher, and we're being trained in how to use the internet, how to file articles for online, so it wasn't abnormal to be asked to go in for training. But it was on a bank holiday Monday. We went into a room we thought was a training room, and at that point a colleague of ours, Robert Winnett, now the deputy editor of the paper, said to us, all right, we're not training, we've got hold of a disc contained the unredacted details of all MP expenses claims going back 4 years, and we need you guys to go through them in 9 days. It was a room not very far from where we're sitting today, maybe 4 meters by 4 meters, and there was no windows in it. We called it the bunker. That didn't help. We created all the pages from in that actual room, so none of the pages about MP expenses were created elsewhere in our newsroom. It was a self-contained mini newsroom. Ahead sat, I think, is Matt Bailey, a news editor. To his right were some of the team, Holly Watt, Rob Winnett. Around the corner I sat, Gordon Rayner, another colleague, and it was around, any one time, around 12 people or so in the room. It got gradually more and more fetid in this room. They didn't want to have anyone cleaning the room because they weren't sure what we were throwing away. We gave commitments to Parliament that we were treating the information, which we did, very sensitively. We had every MP's private address, bank details, we had everything. We were literally inside their private lives. There was lots of humour in the room because you needed it. It was quite intense.
Hello, viewers. We brought down the government. Or Parliament.
We had I think a CD player back then, and we put some music on to try and keep it going and keep the momentum up. I was told to be jolly with them all and try and tell some jokes and just keep morale going, particularly before we could come out and say, here's the story. It wasn't easy. You couldn't search for things like, let's say, a duck house or a moat, because all the documents were photographs, PDF photographs. You simply had to go through each one and click down and look for things and make notes on a pad of paper. So for days and days we were going in there just clicking through this information, not knowing if it's real or not, and trying to work out patterns that we're seeing here, what's going on, because it was a world which no one knew about. There was a thing called a John Lewis list, which is a list of things you could claim for and what was a typical price. So, and the people in the House of Commons Fees Office, they had the very difficult task of trying to judge MPs' claims against what is acceptable on this so-called John Lewis list. What bore heavily on us was whether we're being hoodwinked by somebody. So the big concern was, are these documents real? The problem we had is we couldn't find out if the documents were real until we approached somebody about it. And that happened in May 2009. I remember it being a Thursday, and we had to go to the members of the Labour Cabinet about their expenses. I think my colleague Rob Winnett phoned up and put calls into all of the different members of the Cabinet. One of them was involving council tax and Jack Straw, who at the time was the Justice Secretary. and I think there was a suggestion he had claimed on one property and not the other one, and he came back and confirmed, yes, that was a mistake, it wasn't meant to be claimed that way, and I paid the money back. And as soon as he admitted that, we knew the entire cache of documents was real, and we were away.
I was incredibly busy during that period. That's not an excuse, it's just an explanation.
That day, the daily paper, which is working its way, carrying on reporting the news in a brilliant way, produced its own dummy edition. And Matt Bailey, the news editor, drew up a news list and discussed it, went through all the motions outside of our bunker, knowing full well that all this effort for a different paper may go completely to waste. So we started with the cabinet. Of course, Gordon Brown was Prime Minister, he was on the front page. Then we went through the cabinet on the inside of the pages. The following day we did the Speaker, and then the following Monday's paper we did the Shadow Cabinet.
Where people have made mistakes, they will be punished. Where people have to resign, they will have to resign. Where discipline is necessary, it will happen.
You know, each night we'd go down the escalators from the Telegraph office here in Victoria and go next door to a big hotel and just put the TV on and just watch our stories being poured about and everyone reacting to them.
I am angry about what has happened. It is out of order. Some of this is an abuse of taxpayers' money, and I'm going to deal with it.
It was very rare in your journalistic life that you are the absolute focal point of the national conversation.
What a come down from the Commons to Wandsworth Prison.
It really did capture a feeling of anger amongst members of the public.
They've all kind of done a bad deal on us as the taxpayer.
It wasn't right, was it, really? It was less than honest.
It was a real moment, I think, when maybe after the financial crisis in 2008, when bankers were taken down a peg or two by angry customers and angry members of the public. This was the moment when politics got its comeuppance.